Hello, another one of those beautiful days outside. The sun's not yet shining, but um, just sat out with the beautiful background and birds singing. So, anyway, today we're in John's Gospel, chapter 2, and I want to pick up the story where Jesus clears the temple. I think this one is a story that really sticks in my mind, really from something that happened when I was very, very young. And I used to go to my mum's church, which was a United Reformed church, and they had someone. They did a little play that was based around this story. At the time at the church, attached to the church was a drama society, and my word, were they good! And I remember as a little kid looking on, and everything was quiet, and yeah, and we were just sitting waiting. And suddenly, through the door, this man who was an actor, but to my little boy's view of the world, I wasn't quite sure, um, came racing in. And the scene that had been set up was the one of the temple courts where there was tables and stuff and coins. And as he came running in, he turned over this table. Everything went everywhere, and he declared the words that Jesus did here: "Get out of here! Stop! By turning into my Father's house, into a market," is the version here. And that phrase that this is a place of prayer. And I remember watching it, and I was just dumbstruck, really. The energy, in my mind, the violence, and how dare anyone turn over a table in church? How dare anyone scatter all that money? Someone's now got to pick it up, and all the other stuff that was there. And the impact on me as a child, I was always a little bit frightened of that guy after that, because I was like, well, if he can do that, he could do anything. And that was in church as well. I hadn't quite got around the acting bit, but just reliving that story and looking at the story, just realized that, yeah, yeah, what it must have been like in some ways when Jesus arrived at the temple. It was all business as normal. What were people doing? They had the sheep, they had the cattle, they had the doves, and they were changing money and all sorts of business things. And really, it was a business that had sprung up around the temple because it was a place where people wanted to buy animals for their sacrifice. So it was grabbing hold of that moment, making some money. And it was into that environment that would have gone on day by day, week by week, that Jesus comes into, you know, with great energy. It says when he got there, he knew what he was going to find. In this version, it says he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. Well, he'd been there before. He knew what to expect, but something had changed and shifted in his spirit. It says he made a whip out of cords and drove everybody out of the temple courts, the sheep, the cattle. He scattered the money. He created chaos in that moment. And it says about those that sold doves, he told them to get out and to stop turning, the Father's house into a market. And you think, what on earth is this about? And really, I think you have to see the temple as, in the Old Testament, it was central to as a place of worship, but there's a transition going on. And the transition is that we as human beings become the temple of the Holy Spirit. And Jesus is, as such, clearing out the old, but at the same time, he's pointing to the new. And the disciples, it says, they remember, zeal for your house will consume me. Amazing, statement. They recognize that something of what Jesus is doing, who he is, that there's a zeal in him, a consuming zeal that that causes him to and caused him to act in what appears to be a random way. It wasn't a random way. I think we have to recognize and see this was Jesus making a prophetic declaration about what the temple was for and what it wasn't for as well. And there was this cleansing, this changing going on. And for us, I think it can just be a reminder of we're made to be a place of prayer. We're meant to be a place devoted and dedicated to God in every way. And there's a little opportunity to check ourselves. Are there areas where we're living not according to godliness and righteousness, but we're allowed ourselves to stray from that? That we're keeping our bodies the temple of the Holy Spirit, set aside in life for the purpose of God, the purposes of God, and that we're living with a knowledge and an understanding that we're a people, we're the temple of God and the dwelling place of God, that we have the Holy Spirit in us, and we live and express ourselves from that understanding, from that place. Jesus goes on here. He said, because he's challenged, he's asked what sign, can he basically show to prove his authority. And he makes a really interesting statement. He says, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." And they don't understand what he's saying, because they're like, "Well, just a minute, you that is an extraordinary miracle. You think about it, if you even think about it in the natural way, which they probably were." He's saying, "Yeah, let's knock this place down, and I'll rebuild it in 3 days." And they replied, "It's taken 46 years to build this temple, and you're going to raise it, in 3 days." And Jesus, again, he was speaking prophetically already at that point. He wasn't speaking, into the natural, but it says the temple he'd spoken about was his body. There's already that declaration that the body is a temple of God, and temple of the Holy Spirit. And Jesus, even in John 2, was beginning to lay down one of the things that was an important part of his purpose coming to earth. That he was. It said in referring to his body that one day Jesus, yes, he would die, and he would be raised from the dead. In verse 22, it's interesting, and we see this quite a bit through the scriptures. It says the disciples, when he was raised from the dead, they recalled what he'd said, and they believed the scriptures and the word Jesus has spoken. And we got this, something that happens repeatedly, and we get it later on, that so much of what Jesus taught the disciples doesn't really make sense to them at this point. It's only later on when the picture comes together. It's later on in the context of the resurrection. It's later on in the context of the Holy Spirit, who says the Holy Spirit searches out the deep things of God. The Holy Spirit reveals things of heaven that they understand. And I think that's a real encouragement to us, that we look at the scriptures, we study the scriptures. There'll be many times we don't understand, we don't comprehend what is being put before us, but the Holy Spirit at the right time in the right way will constantly bring revelation, bring understanding that will grow in our knowing and understanding of Jesus, of the Father, of the Holy Spirit. So here in this passage, Jesus is shifting understanding. He's shifting understanding from temple being, a stone building, to the temple being the body, our human body. And Jesus is shifting the understanding that he is here on earth, but he's going to die, and then he's going to resurrect to life again. Excuse me, I got a little bit of a runny nose still. So just grasp hold of that, and like today, we say, Father, there's areas that we need to clean out on the inside. If there's areas we've learned to live with where you don't want us to live with those things, Father, help us to make the adjustments that we're fully living as the temple of God, but beyond that, full of the fruit of the Spirit and exhibiting the fruit of the Spirit. Bless you. Thank you for being with me. Hope you have a great week. Bye for now.